17. There's 17 weeks in the NFL. This is the last one of the regular season. You could tell where my brain function is. We're going to get it on track for you this week because it is an important one when there's a lot of opportunity still with a lot of big tournaments across the DFS industry. And I have two great minds with me this week because Alex Baker is gone. He was disgusted by my face, couldn't see it for another week thanks to the holiday season. So we had to get a couple of our champions from previous episodes of On the Contrary on this week. And first off, let me introduce a man who's in a lot of our Osmo content right now. Guy has his own YouTube channel, which does a great job covering the NFL, the NBA, really all the major sports. Mr. Sal Vetri. How are you doing, Sal? How are the holidays?
The holidays were good, man. I'm looking forward to New Year's too. Yeah, I'm excited for this. Excited, yeah, definitely. But I mean, overwhelmed a little bit. Keep getting news on this 15-game slate. Looking forward to breaking it down with you guys.
Yeah, it is a lot to keep track of, and that's why we brought in another heavy hitter, another alum of On the Contrary, one of our favorite guests from earlier in the year, Mr. Ian Hartitz. How are you doing, Ian? Welcome to On the Contrary once again.
Thanks for having me back, man. Week 17, pretty much DFS Christmas, season long is over. Got a whole bunch of interesting, lineups for people resting and this and that. So I'm excited to break it down.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about this week. And of course, we are brought to you guys by Fantasy Draft as always. There are a lot of big tournaments still going on Fantasy Draft, a lot of big tournaments industry-wide, but Fantasy Draft, the big perk there is you're not paying rake. All the contest entry fees go right to the winners. So go to fantasydraft.com right now and use the promo code OSMO for your free 7-day trial. And check out the Hooters main event. I believe it might be the last week that contest is going on, but it is the largest rake-free contest you will find in NFL DFS. So go to fantasydraft.com right now or download the Fantasy Draft app on your local app store and use that promo code OSMO for your free 7-day trial. All right, Ian, Sal, you guys are both really smart guys about football. That's a really eloquent way for me to put that. But also, it's been a long year. We've had a lot of lessons, a lot of things I think we've seen throughout the year. So, Sal, I'll ask you first. Is there any big lesson you've seen from the NFL this year or anything that you're ready to put into practice for Week 17? Because, as Ian mentioned, this is a week where we can win the money by just being not idiots, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing for every single year, but for NFL, especially this late in the season, just so many games, really paying attention to ownership at this point. And then moving from just preseason, covering that more so than any other year into the regular season, even now is just the coach speak that you see from the regular season to now and really trying to figure out which one of these teams and coaches for the most part it actually holds any sort of weight with, because we've seen a ton of it actually matter when it comes to guys like Chris Carson and a lot of it not matter at all when it comes to guys like maybe Ty Montgomery early on. So that's just moving forward into your next year, 2020, when it comes to really season long, but also following into the DFS.
Yeah, there's a lot of momentum building going on across the league, both for the playoffs and for next year. And also a lot of teams are going to be fully checked out, including possibly the Jaguars, whose coach may be fired, maybe not. We'll find out over the course of the next 24 hours. But Ian, also, you are a guy working over at RotoWorld doing a great job with all of your NFL content. Is there anything you've seen in terms of a trend, or I guess anything that you find particularly interesting here for this last week of the regular season as we head into the playoffs?
Yeah, I think one thing that kind of, like, for example, this preseason, I didn't have as much Mark Andrews as I should have. And, I was kind of worried about his snaps. He wasn't even playing like 50% race last year. But these tight ends and offenses that don't have like a truly defined number one wide receiver are so valuable. We saw the same thing happen in Oakland with Darren Waller, where if you have this good pass catching tight end that has a true shot at kind of rising up their team's depth chart and being not just a starting tight end, but being the number one pass catcher in that offense, that's super valuable. I think we really got to keep an eye on that next year, try to identify some of these late round tight ends. Because, look, guys like Jared Cook and, Hunter Henry, they can have these big weeks. But when you see these guys, when they might be the starting tight end, but they're number 3 or 4 option in their own passing game, it's just not nearly as consistent. So, like this week, for example, I know everyone's going to be on Tyler Higbee in this matchup against the Cardinals, but there's a whole lot going on in that Rams offense other than just Tyler Higbee. So I think I've taken like a less chalkier Darren Waller in a must-win game for Oakland, is something that I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more later. But I think in general, just as we continue to focus on the tight ends, you're always going to have your Kelsey, Kittle, Ertz, but figuring out beyond that, like get the guys that we can probably guarantee not only the most snaps, but the most targets.
Yeah, one guy we'll talk about this week, Dallas Goedert, getting a big bump up in ownership and opportunity with no Zach Ertz out there. But tight end certainly going to be a spot to consider, as well as the motivations. We're going to talk a lot about motivations throughout this show because there are a lot of teams that are playing for nothing, including possibly those Rams who have rested teams historically in Week 17. This year, they're really just playing for morale because they're not going into the playoffs. So as we go game by game, we will talk about the motivations as best we can because that is an important deciding factor here. And last plug, guys, hit that like button and also use the promo code Contrary right now at osmo.com/join. If you want to see all these ownership projections and player projections, use that promo code Contrary for half off your first week of an Awesemo Plus membership. All right, guys, let's get into the games here. And the first game is one that seems like it should have some fantasy upside, and also is going to be one where a team is playing for something. New Orleans at Carolina. New Orleans is playing for seeding here. They want this win. It is a game where they still could not benefit from winning here, but they are going to be playing with their full intent here of winning to try to bump up their seeding and secure the bye as well as home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Carolina's playing to possibly give Christian McCaffrey a run at some records. He has one really obvious one. He can be a 1,000 rushing and receiving player if he gets 67 yards, I believe, in the receiving end of things. But also he is still in range of Chris Johnson's record overall for total yards from scrimmage. I believe 215 yards short there. So, Ian, I'll ask you first here. The New Orleans side, we know the motivations here. We know the guys, Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas, they're heavily involved. But so let's talk about that side first. How are you feeling about Kamara? How are you feeling about Thomas? Kamara in a great spot. Thomas priced up to a pretty uncomfortable level, but he's just been a monster on the year. Just keeps getting 100-yard games.
We know Kamara and Michael Thomas are going to produce. I mean, there's no doubt about that. If you want to pay out for those guys, I'm not going to disagree with you. Like you said, must-win game. I mean, they're going to be trying to score 1 million points on the Panthers. But how does everyone score on the Panthers? It's running the ball. Them and the Jaguars cannot stop literally anybody. We see this week after week after week. Like Devontae Freeman, he looked like a non-wash running back for 2 games this year against the Panthers, against the Jaguars. And here we are again with this matchup against the Panthers defense, and there's an underpriced early down running back that people are afraid to roster. And it's Latavius Murray, only 5,600. I mean, I'm seeing very minimal projected ownership with them across the industry. I know Kamara has been the workhorse, but in a game that they're favored to win by double digits against a rush defense that Latavius could bring some value on only 10 rush attempts, but I think this week more in particular, more than other weeks, we could see Latavius get leaned on more than normal, not only because of how easy they should be able to run the ball, but also because they're still going to be a little bit smart. I mean, if they get out ahead, I don't think we're going to see Kamara playing too much in the second half. So I think Latavius is a sneaky, bet to potentially be able to, find the end zone once or twice.
Yeah, I mean, Latavius is certainly getting enough work here. And as Ian mentioned, that Carolina defense just so bad. And yeah, really, Freeman is kind of the litmus test where the workload for him, not the greatest, but still a guy who's had big results against Carolina, against Jacksonville. And this matchup against Carolina is one of the better ones for Kamara if he gets that workload. Last week, he was buoyed by 2 touchdowns. Sal, how are you feeling about the prospects here for Alvin Kamara, given the fact that he does have a guy who takes touches away? And he also really got the 2 touchdowns last week, but for the most part, hasn't been a necessity for the Saints to get into the red zone or to the end zone.
Yeah, I think where the ownership comes in, it makes sense. The big week last week, I think a lot of people catching on to how bad the Panthers right now passed the Dolphins for most yards per game so far this season, 127.3, most touchdowns by 9. It's a really good spot for Kamara. Where the ownership is, I'm just getting a little bit more spread out to other guys up there like Zeke was Fournette, so we'll see what that happens with this when I update that. But yeah, I think it's okay. If you wanted to get more and you wanted to take a stance on Kamara, like Ian said, I wouldn't have anything negative to say. I'm slightly below the field right now, but chance that comes up with Fournette now doubtful, unlikely to play. Yeah, Kamara, I could go either way on. I think the one stance I will make, instead of really finding anything lower owned from either side of this one, I think I might just have, I mentioned it earlier with Chris Randone. There's a chance I just take 0% Michael Thomas in this one. It's an aggressive stance. He was 9,900. I think he was 9,300 last time he played these Panthers. 9,900 and 9,300. These 3 times he was at those price tags on a main slate. He produced last week a ton, 34. He was needed in some winning lineups. But the 2 previous times he was that expensive, he produced 28 and 29. He was nowhere needed in the top scores. And if you get any other wide receiver going for 25 to 30, they're going to be $2,000, $3,000 cheaper. So it's just an opportunity cost thing. At 9,900, as of right now, I have 0%, and I don't know if it'll change. But I don't recommend the aggressive stance, but if you can stomach it, I think it's okay.
Yeah, and there is a player who's a little bit cheaper in Julio Jones, who's getting a comparable amount of work over the last few games, and certainly questionable motivation there. But Thomas's price is pretty high. Ian, how are you feeling about that high price for Michael Thomas? Are you willing to go there? Because there is also just a value in knowing that you're going to get that 25 to 30 fantasy points from him.
It's just so – I mean, usually I don't want to pay up for wide receivers because we're kind of banking everything on 8 to 10 targets. But with these guys, Julio, Michael, and Devontae, it's like we're getting 12 to 15 targets projections, it seems like. I mean, it's just ridiculous how much these passing games are flowing through him. No, but I'm going to be underway on him as well. I just think that when teams play the Panthers, they're going to be able to run the ball. Game script is not going in Michael Thomas's favor. Maybe he does continue to get 12 or 15 of Drew Brees' 25 or 30 pass attempts, but – I'm going to be underway on Michael Thomas. I agree with a lot of what Sal was saying.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's definitely a tough price point there. If you can afford him, it's great. Definitely going to give you some security. Definitely a good cash game play if you can get there based upon his ownership. But it is a tough price to pay. And a wide receiver, as Alex always says here on the show, one of the most variant positions out there. And Michael Thomas's ability to fight off that variance is really impressive. One angle here, though, which does jump out as being contrarian. This is a contrarian show. Because of the run defense here, you could stack Saints and go Breeze and Thomas and Jared Cook. It's not been a stack that always gets there. And I don't love stacking Breeze with Kamara and Thomas just because Kamara's got some value tied up in the rush game. You're paying that salary in part because of his run game ability, so he's not perfectly correlated with Drew Brees. But Sal, do you have any interest here in going with the Saints offensive stack? Because Carolina's pass defense does have the rep for being good, but they're not playing for anything. The Saints are, and that is one way to get away from a chalky Alvin Kamara is just going with the Saints pass game.
Yeah, if I got to like any Thomas this week, it would just be by stacking it up. I might get to Cook over Kamara. Jared Cook, just a lot of red zone upside as of late. Not a ton of volume for what the price tag is. You might get 5 targets projected out of him. But yeah, if I was to get to any, right now I have barely any because just not getting to Thomas. So it just leaves not left a lot less on the bone if you want to get to stacks there. But I have like 2% Breeze. So I would say that I'm probably not getting there. But if you did get there, I'd probably go Cook and then Thomas.
I do like the Cook call just because you're kind of pivoting off, Dallas Goedert, who's going to be ridiculously chalky. And, teams can run on the Panthers, but they get in the red zone eventually. And then from there, it's anyone's guess as to who actually scores those touchdowns. So Cook's been pretty much like a consistent top 5 tight end ever since Breeze came back and they got healthy together, like from week 10 on. So, it's one of the few times in recent years that the Saints passing game has like been going so evenly through like just a couple players. So Cook, Thomas, Kamara, and I think obviously Latavius if you're really feeling crazy.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. And I mean, look, it's just one approach here that jumps out. People probably not be paying much for Breeze. We have Breeze projected for around 5% ownership right now. So that is one way to get different here with a New Orleans team that is one of the highest implied totals on the slate, 29.3 implied points for them. Carolina side, another guy who is pretty expensive and similar thing to Michael Thomas where, if Christian McCaffrey has the upside, he certainly has the upside, but there are other running backs too who are going to be substantially cheaper who can probably get you at a comparable price point. I guess the thing for me is if they're going to really give him a realistic shot, and the offensive coordinator there did say that he wants to get him a shot at these records, like 215 yards from McCaffrey, which with Will Grier at quarterback could be 20 checkdowns of 10 yards at a clip at best. So that's a spot here where if McCaffrey is going to be targeting that, he could have the upside. Ian, are you willing to take a stab at McCaffrey on the faint chance that he's competing for records that, we don't know if he'll be in there the full game, but the expectation is he's going to be according to Perry Fuel?
Not really. I don't believe that they're going to put this guy out there for the full game. Come on. Like, we're really going to give McCaffrey 20, 30 touches in this meaningless game. They didn't last year, and I know he wasn't as close to the records, but I want to say going to week 17 last year, he was like 160 receiving yards away. And I know like the big record we're hoping they chase is that, all-purpose yards in a single season, which he's within shouting distance. So I could see it, but man, it's going to be tough. He is more than ever, especially with DJ Moore out there, is no one to focus on other than McCaffrey in this offense. So I'm probably going to be off McCaffrey. The only Panther that interests me even a little bit is Curtis Samuel, because I know he only got 5 targets last week with DJ Moore mostly out, but I feel like we're kind of letting that one game influence it too much. He's the number 1 receiver there right now in a game where the Panthers should have to throw. If McCaffrey does go out, we're going to see Samuel actually get some running back snaps as he's been getting for the last 3 or 4 weeks. So I'm probably going to be lower on McCaffrey, lower on Michael Thomas. I think there's better values underneath. Like, why pay up for Michael Thomas when you can get Tyreek Hill for much cheaper in a game where he's going at it? And just same thing with McCaffrey. Like, why go for McCaffrey when we have Ezekiel Elliott much cheaper and we have the higher touch count? So it's just too much risk for me for that salary.
Yeah, it does seem like you're chasing a kind of something at the end of the tunnel there, a pot of gold at the end of the tunnel that might not even be there. Sal, how are you feeling about McCaffrey? Be the tiebreaker here because, McCaffrey still, like, if he's going to go for it. And I think one thing last year, too, which is worth noting, different coach, though, but they did announce in advance that McCaffrey was only going to play like a drive or two, I think, in that one. They said he was going to be getting a preseason load. This one, the indication seemed like he'll get the full load. But Sal, how are you leaning here with McCaffrey?
Yeah, I'm probably just going to make this a push because right now I'm like right around where the field's at in terms of my own ownership. And it's interesting because I just set an aggressive stance on Thomas at a similar price. But we've seen it in past weeks that there's just, on a 15-game slate, it gets a little bit more risky, but there's just less opportunity cost at running back. There's probably 10 to 15 to 20 wide receivers you can see go for 100 and a touchdown this week. Whereas with running backs, because of so many committees and just one per team at most that'll have a featured role, there's probably like 5-6 guys on this slate that can outscore or really push McCaffrey. So I'll still get ownership to him. I'm slightly right around the field, slightly below it. So I'm okay. I prefer both these guys, Thomas and Kamara, or Thomas and McCaffrey in cash because of the price points, like Ian said, lots of other guys to go to. I also think another important note on the Samuel call is, the ownership's low and he's like a gadget receiver, like Ian said, in the backfield, but similar to Tyreek Hill, it's really hard to try and put a shadow cornerback like Lattimore on him because they just move him all around the field to get to just positive matchups and utilize his skill set. So I think Curtis Samuel with no DJ Moore is fine. Probably not going to touch the Chris Hogans or the Jarius Wrights. And then McCaffrey, I'm right around the field on. So yeah, I think it's mainly the top end guys here.
Yeah, and it's worth noting too, Will Grier stinks. Like, I think it's just want to circle back on that because I did play a little bit of him and did watch that game just to see how he would look. And didn't even have that first game of David Blau where he came out aggressive. He just a lot of short passes, a lot of just not looking good. When he did throw it deep to Wright or Samuels looked bad. Ian, do you have a lean with Will Grier? Were you feeling stronger about him than I was?
Man, like I made the mistake after week 2. I was like, okay, I don't know anything about Kyle Allen, but he can't be worse than like a hurt Cam Newton playing on a broken foot. I was very wrong. So this time, I really didn't give Will Grier the benefit of the doubt with it. Maybe he looks better because he couldn't have looked much worse, but I don't think the matchup there's nothing to me that tells us that we should expect more about Will Grier based on what we've seen so far in this matchup. So, yeah.
Yeah, so definitely a risk there if you are going with Samuel or Wright, just because, Grier is not a good quarterback. But those guys did get the ball thrown to them, so certainly going to have some upside. Let's keep going to the slate here, a game that people in the YouTube chat right now talking about Danny Dimes, people intrigued by the fact that he just went nuts last week. But Philadelphia at the Giants, talked about Dallas Goedert a little bit earlier, but he looks like the chalk tight end play of the week. No Zach Ertz. Goddard also went nuts last week, so box score watchers will be very in on him. And there really just are no targets left in this offense for Philly. Against the Giants defense that gives up a lot of pass game production, one would think that Dallas Goedert has that opportunity, but he's also priced at a range where he's definitely not a value play in this spot. And also on the Giants side, Saquon Barkley's been going nuts, getting a tougher matchup here against a pretty competent Philly run defense. Daniel Jones gets that Philly secondary, which has not been good, and Jones has shown big upside. So Ian, how are you feeling about the spot here in this game? Do you think this game shoots out? Do you think there's potential for both pass games or Saquon as well to get there, and Miles Sanders? There's honestly a lot of great fantasy plays to talk about.
Yeah, no, I think the running backs are both a little bit under-owned just based on the 3-down roles they're probably both going to have. I know Jordan Howard's coming back, but when they've already said he's not going to be a number 2 running back, he's number 3 back behind Scott and Sanders. It seems like he's almost there for emergency only. He literally just got cleared for contact from his shoulder injury a couple of days ago, and he prides himself in his whole games about being this physical inside runner. So it doesn't seem likely we see too much of Jordan Howard, especially just with how well Miles Sanders has been playing and the fact they don't have hardly any other weapons to put out there. So I think Miles Sanders at 6,800, he could easily be, an extra $700 more expensive on DraftKings. And, he's giving you that 3-down roll. I'm in on Miles. The thing with this Philly secondary, so like Ronald Darby's now on IR. Jalen Mills is questionable with an ankle injury. Like they were never good, but they played a lot better in the last 6 or 7 weeks when they got those outside cornerbacks healthy. But the true worst of the worst we've seen in the secondary was last year when they were down their backup cornerbacks and kind of like that weeks 2 through 8 part of this year. And that's where we're back at again. So I think this Giants passing game can just explode here. Only Lamar Jackson has more games with 30-plus fantasy points than Daniel Jones this season. They've all come against pretty bad teams. I would not want to put those two in the same sentence ever again the rest of my life. But we've seen Daniel Jones have these big weeks. Sterling Shepard, I think, is kind of being priced as the clear-cut number 1, which I don't think he is. So I think there's a lot of value in contrarianism and stacking Daniel Jones with Golden Tate and or Darius Slayton.
Sal, how are you feeling about Ian Harditz's MVP pick of Daniel Jones?
Oh man, I think I'm on board with this. So so pointing out that Ronald Darby on IR, the no Jalen Mills is huge. You're gonna get, I don't know, maybe Rasul Douglas, who was just terrible when he was playing earlier this year. It was like a toaster out there nonstop. So it's a good spot for Daniel Jones. You get the price bump, so it's keeping his ownership down. And yeah, he's probably overpriced at 6,400, but we're paying up to get a little bit contrarian on the show. And yeah, I think right now Golden Tate is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, contrarian wide receivers. He's 2% owned. You saw the price point drop almost $1,000 because of his starts with Eli, where he had no just rapport with him at all. Daniel Jones comes in, averaging 10 targets per game to the slot. He throws 11 last week to Daniel Jones or to Golden Tate. It's just a nice spot for Tate, not getting any ownership and actually cheap now. He'll see Avonte Maddox in the slot. So I do like Golden Tate a good amount on this slate, really in any format, cash or GPPs. And then I think Daniel Jones is fine to get to. And yeah, I would kind of echo that. I'd even rather get the Slayton before getting to Shepard just due to pricing.
Yeah, Slayton, I think it wasn't very involved last week, but still has been Daniel Jones's preferred receiver. Tate going to be the guy who gets the volume there because, he's getting paid. He is the name. He's the guy who gets the best separation. But Slayton is a guy who does have that big tournament breaking upside. And he's the kind of guy, week 17, doesn't shock you when you see him put up 30 fantasy points all of a sudden, and he's just been a forgotten piece. Sal, how are you feeling about Dallas Goedert as chalk here on the other side? Because he projects really well for Osmo. He looks good. Zach Ertz obviously been very involved. Him not being in the mix here, they have to rely on somebody, and one would think it would be Dallas Goedert. But how do you feel about this Philly offense?
Yeah, I mean it's really Goddard. It's Ward a little bit. I think it's interesting because we might end up seeing just a lot of the ownership spread out right now because of 15 game slate. We might see that the Eagles become, I guess, quote unquote, the chalkiest stack or the one that rises the most. And it's weird to think that Dallas Goddard and Greg Ward are going to be a part of the highest owned stack this week. But yeah, Goddard, I think the ownership probably will continue to rise once we get another update. So I want to see how high it gets. But yeah, it's hard to not like it. 4,900, even with Ertz being out there, he's had at least 5 targets in 8 straight games, averaging 8 targets over the last 5. And now you take away Ertz's 7-8 targets per game. So it's a good spot for Goddard. The one concern you might see is just double teams being forced to Goddard that you were getting for Ertz. But the Giants were like the one team that didn't double team Ertz, shocker, and they really don't have this just personnel in the secondary to stop people. So I think that it's a fine spot for Goddard. Right now I have more than the 22% projected.
Yeah, and I guess one thing, if you were afraid of Goddard, the pivot to me would be Josh Perkins, a guy who they have run out. They split him out as well. They use him in some creative ways. He didn't get any work a couple weeks ago where he filled in when they basically lost all the receivers in that game where Jeffrey went out. But he didn't get work the following week, which kind of surprised me. But he's a guy who's in the mix. He did run some routes last week. So he'd be a guy I would think could take on a bigger role at minimum price. I don't know he's a guy I would have a ton of, but I don't mind taking a stab at Joshua Perkins just because he's a pivot to Goddard. And Goddard is going to be the chalk play of the week. Let's keep going through here. And also just fast on motivations. Philly obviously playing for the NFC East. If they win this game, they are in. So it is a very important game for them. So they have high motivation. The Giants have, they're just playing for it. Washington at Dallas, also a game that's very important, but that one hinges on Philadelphia. Both these games will be going on at the same time. Ezekiel Elliott in this game is going to be a top-owned play, while Washington is turning to Case Keenum, which one would think would be a decent move, except there is no Terry McLaurin out there, and it is, in fact, a move because Dwayne Haskins is hurt. So we have a skeleton crew Washington team with Steven Sims, who went nuts last week. Kelvin Harmon going to be in the mix. Who knows if Washington can score, but Ezekiel Elliott looks like a very strong play. Sal, Zeke, chalk play of the week. Are you with the field? Are you above the field? What are you doing with a very chalky Zeke in a must-win spot?
Yeah, I'm a little bit above the field right now on it. I just like the price point, 8,000 at home. Like you said, must-win spot here. And it's just a banged-up Washington defense that, their secondary is even worse now with no Collins, but up front, at least, it's going to be, and I think that's meaningful because they move down the field easier. You get Zeke. He had no red zone touches last week, but he still leads the league at 57. He's been fantastic. It's a spot where he has the best offensive line advantage on the weekend. Yeah, $8,000 Zeke. I think that you probably end up getting somewhere around a 22 to 24 touches out of him, and the offense should be fine moving the ball in the passing game. Gets more red zone appeal. I like Zeke a lot this week.
Ian, how are you feeling about Zeke in this Dallas offense where another really high total, 29.3 implied points for these guys, and it just seems hard to imagine Zeke failing in this particular situation?
Yeah, I love Zeke. Lock him in the cash game lineups for sure. And if you're going to do a chalky guy in tournaments, make it a running back that has 20-plus touch floor protection. He's going to get fed the ball more than ever with the Dak Prescott injury. The question is, do we want to touch either of these passing games? And the Cowboys secondary hasn't really been all that good all year. Now Byron Jones sprained his ankle in practice on Thursday, so they're a little bit less than 100% too. As Sal was saying, the Washington secondary is a graveyard right now. They're literally, I think they're down to backups every single safety and cornerback position. I just don't know if Dak can get on the ball. And, he's hurt, but at the same time, you watched that game last week, he missed some throws, but they also dropped 5 or 6 balls. Michael Gallup, still got around 100. I know Cooper's not 100%, but at least, we've seen the home away splits over the years with him be pretty extreme. He's getting a secondary that might somehow be worse than that Eagles group you saw last week. I think the contrarian play, if the projected ownership is pretty low to kind of roll with Dak and Cooper. You can put Dak and Zeke in the same stacks, I think, just because you're going to get all the Cowboys touchdowns if you do that. So it's a little bit unique there, and they have been using Zeke a little bit more as a receiver. It's still been a little bit off and on, but he does have that upside. So I wanted to go with the Case Keenum, Terry McLaurin stack beginning of the week. Obviously, McLaurin F1 is out. I guess Chris Thompson, 3,900 if you really want to get weird. But now I'm probably sticking the Cowboys side of the ball here.
Yeah, I'm a little intrigued by Washington. I don't think Steven Sims is going to be as good without Terry McLaurin drawing the attention away. Right. But Sims is a guy who was getting targeted pretty well by Dwayne Haskins, and I don't know what that means, but Case Keenum, to me, he does have a little bit of the poorest man's Ryan Fitzpatrick in him, where he does like to sling it. He had some success earlier in the year, and I was actually pretty into him as a fantasy player before they went to Haskins, or they tried out McCoy too. And then they started running the ball more. It was just a lot of things that Washington was throwing against the wall. So I don't mind taking some stabs on the Redskins just in the hopes that they get something going. And Thompson can be a guy you could pair as well, but Harmon also projects pretty decently for Osmo as a value play. So I think these guys are in the mix for me. I guess we should talk more about Amari Cooper on the Dallas side because Ian brought these guys up. I would favor Michael Gallup. I don't get why Cooper wasn't in the mix down the end of that game last time out. They went to Tavon Austin allegedly because he was a better matchup, but that just doesn't make sense. It has to be that Cooper's hurt, and I think the results also would indicate Cooper might be hurt. Gallup is cheap. Gallup is pretty affordable. He has a monster upside. Sal, who would you lean between Cooper and Gallup or Randall Cobb if you want to throw in a little wild card there?
Yeah, I like both of these guys above where their ownership comes in right now. If I had to pick one of them, I think I would pick Amari, but again, they're really both close for me. Amari's probably going to see Aaron Colvin. And this is just like Ian was saying, just graveyards of guys out there cut by the Texans earlier this year. One of the worst cornerbacks in the league, according to Pro Football Focus. It's a really good advantage for Amari. Amari's probably dealing with an injury. We'll probably get it at the end of the year. I mean, they've already been saying it. Probably maybe see that he needs surgery or something. He's just not been the same when you just see him perform out there. So that's a concern, and it's hard to kind of factor that into it without having it for sure. But at 7% ownership, Dak's like a top 3 owned quarterback for me right now. So I'm getting to both of these guys. I think they're both fine, but I would prefer Amari if just picking one.
Ian, you mentioned your Cooper love, and obviously Gallup and Cobb are in that mix too. Adjusting for price and the values and all of that, is Cooper still the most appealing guy to you, or the fact that maybe he's a little bit higher price and his ownership is going to be lower what appeals? Or I guess, is there any reason why you might go to Cobb as a very, very cheap play or Gallup as a mid-price play?
I'm cool with. I mean, let's go Dak, Cooper, and Gallup, same laps. I think Cobb's kind of been a little bit phased out of the offense more so in recent weeks, but since they're bye, like Gallup actually has out targeted Cooper by 2. I mean, they've been way more 1A, 1B wide receivers than I think kind of the first half of the season where Cooper was more the clear cut number 1. Some of that I think had to do. I mean, Cooper just had a miserable. Really, like the blow-up week, I think should be coming for Cooper here. I'm going pretty hard on Cooper, actually, because if you look at last week was a smash spot on the road against the Eagles. I get that. Didn't look 100%. Still have, 12 or 13 targets. I mean, and so as long as he's out there getting targets, kind of like T.Y. Hilton, it's not as big of a deal if the snaps aren't there. But you go before that, and it was like Jalen Ramsey, Darius Slay in Chicago, Stephon Gilmore. I mean, you talk about just brutal cornerback matchup after brutal cornerback matchup. So I'm fine with Gallup too, because again, it has been, especially in the recent weeks, like who knows which guy is going to have the bigger game. But more than anything, like just give me pieces of this Cowboys passing game. So, I don't want to hate on Randall Cobb either. I guess he could do his thing as well. But no, I would go Cooper over Gallup, even kind of with the pricing discrepancy.
Yeah, one thing, and this is sort of why I often reference air yards, but I do think it's a valuable insight here, where Gallup had 11 targets, Cooper had 12 last week, but Gallup had 194 air yards. And of course, if you're not familiar, air yards are just the depth of the target where that's occurring, compared to 82 for Cooper. So Gallup is running the deep routes. Gallup is out there getting those shots. Whether Dak can get in the ball with his shoulder messed up, that's another question. But I think the opportunity is there for Gallup, and he's been a monster deep ball guy. And if his price is going to be there, to me, he's one of those guys too. Monster upside. If we have questions about Cooper, I think that's the value in going to Gallup. But it doesn't matter if Dak can't throw. So that's a key part of the equation for a quarterback. I'll go out on the limb for week 17. Let's keep going through these games here. This one's interesting. So this one, 2 teams playing for literally nothing but pride, but it does have one of the highest combined totals on the slate, Atlanta at Tampa Bay. This spot here last week, anybody who played that Saturday slate can tell you, especially if you were watching that, tilting as could possibly be in DFS, watching Jameis Winston overthrow receivers by 5 yards. The thumb issues definitely didn't help him out there, but one's expecting him to be back out there. He's questionable, but he practiced in full the last 2 days of the week, so he would be back out there, I would think. And in this spot, I'm willing to go back because nobody seems like they're going to be playing the Bucs. All these guys under 10% owned besides O.J. Howard, who's a little bit higher than that. But Perriman got a lot of opportunity. It's crazy. I would not have expected a 2019 outcome that I'm willing to pay $7,000 for Brashad Perriman, but he had a ton of opportunity in that spot. So did Watson. So did Howard. These guys got a lot of throws their way, and Atlanta can score as well through the air. So their stacks are looking good. Ian, if you had to choose here, I guess one stack out of these 2, or do you just want to not have any of these stacks? I'm going to assume you want at least one of these guys.
Honestly, I'm leaning towards none, but I'm nervous about fading these Tampa Bay guys because I was yelling from the mountaintops last week to everyone that would listen, don't play Brashad Perriman. Not only did he go for over 100 yards, but he should have had another 30-yard touchdown. Like you said, James just missed him. on a touchdown. He had another sweet catch on the sideline where, his little toe marked him out of bounds. I mean, the guy is playing legit great. It's not just like he's getting wide open and busting out. It's wild. It's 2019. Here we are, and Brashad Perryman's going to be a deservingly high-priced wide receiver. I mean, it's bonkers to see. If the ownership's down with him and Justin Watson, yeah, let's do it, because Jameis is just going to keep throwing the ball no matter what happens, no matter how many picks he throws in the first half. They're going to keep lining them up. The Falcons, the only thing that makes you want to kind of fade this game in general is like the Falcons defense has truly been very good in the second half of the season. They've allowed 13 fewer points per game in weeks 9 through 16 compared to 1 through 8. I mean, they've not, and this has been against some good teams too. I mean, they have legit been a solid defense. On the other side, we know Tampa shuts down every rushing attack. They just sell out to do that, and whatever. And other than, Julio, yeah, pay up for Julio. Give me Julio over Michael Thomas for sure, one-on-one. Other than that, I don't really know who to trust in this Atlanta offense because, again, Devontae Freeman is not facing the Panthers, not facing the Jaguars, so I don't want anything to do with them. Maybe it could be Austin Hooper week. I was fading him throughout the first half of the year because it's not like Atlanta ever shows up on Sunday and says, hey, let's feed Austin Hooper over Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones today. But with Ridley out of the picture, Hooper really is their number 2 option, and they're going to have to throw the ball. So, yeah.
So one little bit of credence to the Tampa Bay thing, and again, going back to air yards. Ian, if you had to guess, how many air yards did Jameis throw for just Perriman, Watson, and Howard last week against Houston?
350.
Sal, what would be your guess? Just the air yards for just those 3 guys.
Just those 3 guys. I'll go 380.
495 air yards, these 3 assholes. So they could have had 500. Jameis could have had 500 receiving yards, just those guys. It doesn't include the passes to Ishmael Hyman. Doesn't include Cody McElroy got targeted. Cameron Brate was targeted. Dario Agunwale.
Just Perriman. What was just Perriman?
Perriman was 201. So he led him. Watson 161, Howard 133.
Wow. Oh my God.
So if Jameis is accurate, which look, I'm asking the world of everybody, and that's my Christmas wish for Jameis to be accurate. But if he's even semi-accurate, that's a lot of upside for these guys. And I can't get away from that, especially if people just don't want to, nobody wants to pay $7,000 for Brashad Perriman. I get it, but it's a different player. It's a different role. It's a different offense. So Sal, now that I've sold you, how much Jameis will you have in this Tampa Bay stack?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not the same Tampa Bay team, and it's scary because, yeah, you got to pay up for Perriman and prioritize it almost in stacks if you want to get there. So, yeah, right now it's scary, but I'm coming in with this Jameis, this team in Tampa Bay as my 3rd highest owned stack. I don't love it. The matchup in Atlanta, their secondary has been, both sides of this, really better, and pass rushes have improved throughout the season. So it's not as good as it seems. Both run defenses are great, but yeah, the total's still there. Even if a bunch of the money's coming in on the under on that total, even if it misses the 48 implied points by 1 or 2, it's still like the highest total on the slate. So the fact that there's no ownership I'm going to get here outside of Julio, you mentioned it's bags, really nobody getting owned above 10%. If you had a ton of ownership, I think it would be a good fade spot. But yeah, Matt Ryan in Atlanta's right now my highest owned stack. Was surprised to see him not really own that much. So I have a good amount of Julio and Hooper main guys in there. And then on the opposite side, I think Watson's my favorite run back option from Tampa Bay.
Yeah, it's just, I think overall, this is a spot where 2 teams playing for nothing, I think, can drive down the ownership a bit. But these are 2 teams have been playing for nothing for the last month, and they continue to sling it around, continue to play for pride. So certainly some risk, maybe not a game to go completely nuts with, but I definitely will have more than the field of this game just because Jameis just throws, man. That guy just loves to throw. He might be not a great human being, but man, does that boy love to sling the rock. Let's keep going into another game that actually does matter, but also have some compelling fantasy points here. Chargers at the Chiefs. The Chiefs are playing for seeding, or they will be playing for seeding, but they also could dial back their offense because they're going to know pretty fast. They're competing against the Patriots for a playoff spot right now. If the Patriots are heading their game against Miami, Andy Reid doesn't like to play his guys if he doesn't have to. I think there's some concern here. This game could end up pretty much done at halftime. But still, Kansas City looks good on paper if this game does go and if they're going full bore. So, Ian, how are you feeling about Kansas City here? This Kansas City stack not going to be terribly highly owned again, even though we've seen before against Denver a couple weeks ago. People don't play them, and they still just do what they do and have massive potential if you are going with a 3-man stack.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no Lamar Jackson this week. Breeze and Rodgers are on the road. Deshaun Watson's probably going to be resting. Tannehill's got Derrick Henry eating it. James and Matt Ryan, they're doing what they can, but they got banged up cast. Dak's got the shoulder. Mahomes, more than ever this entire season, is clearly the highest projected quarterback and should be. And, yeah, he's looking like he's going to be under-owned. I know you got to pay up for the guy, and you got to pay up for Tyreek and Kelsey as well, but man, if there's ever a week that I think they're going to put things together and just blow up, I think it's this spot. Chargers team that hasn't been quitting, but at the same time, they just keep mixing in these hellaciously hilarious losses with just kind of poor overall efforts. They smacked the Jaguars a few weeks ago, but who doesn't do that recently? And man, yeah, I want Mahomes. Like, I would not. I have Tyreek Hill as my number one wide receiver this week. I just think it's been too long since he's been, going nuts. He's only had 8 targets the last few games. I get it. It's been kind of a volume issue, surprisingly, but I just don't think it's going to last that long. And again, home spot. This Chiefs team, like, beyond all the Ravens hype, this Chiefs team has really been been peaking the last 5 or 6 weeks. Their defense, I believe, has only allowed 31 points in the last 4 or 5 games. So I want all these high-priced Chiefs. Damian Williams, I'm sure, is going to be deservingly pretty chalky. I think only 4,700 on DraftKings. Spencer Ware out. We can look at a 15 to 20 touch projection with him. I get it. Get him in your cash lineups. On the Chargers side of the ball, it just seems to me like a blowout spot where, we don't see them doing much. I know the Chiefs, we got to be careful when we look at these defenses that are very good against the pass and bad against the run, because we see what the Ravens too in these DVOA ranks. I don't think that's very indicative of a bad defense. We see the opposite when we look at defenses that are good against the run and bad against the pass. Everyone can add more guys to the boxes. You can stop the run if you need to. Now, you can't really stop the pass when you need to in 2019 these days. So Chiefs defense, I know some of the numbers say they're not good against running backs, but I would just really caution in loading up on Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler, because they're going to need to keep this game close, which I don't think is going to happen. And then we'll see how Phillip Rivers does under pressure, because I don't think this year it's been too good.
Sal, how do you lean there? Because Ian raises a lot of great points. Like, I think that the Chargers defense, certainly gives up some production. You're giving up a 71% completion rate. So they are also a team that not giving up a lot of pass production on the year, just pretty much keeping the ball in front of them, but obviously not going to fly to Patrick Mahomes. And Kansas City's defense, that run game still looks really appealing to people, but perhaps it does clamp down a bit if you can't get anything going through the air here. And if you're trailing, you're still going to try to throw. So, Sal, what do you like in this game, the Kansas City stack? And I guess also talk to me about the Chargers players and anybody who jumps out to you there.
Yeah, on the KC side, I think the one that stands out the most, we'll see what happens with LaShawn McCoy. Some reporters saying that he should be active for this one. I don't see why he would be active, though. Healthy scratch twice this year. Once was last week, just to try and preserve the body of the old aging running back for the postseason. So those 2 games, you got Damian Williams getting 24 touches in 19. If you have no McCoy, I think Damian Williams is probably deservingly so for the ownership, and I'd have a lot more. He'd probably become the best value play in the slate. In this Chiefs offense, you're locking in 18 to 20 touches. He averages over 15 fantasy points per game in those environments. So I think Damian Williams is great. Yeah, Tyreek Hill, I'll have more than the 4%. Mahomes, though, at 6%, that's about where I am when it comes to just stacking in GPPs based on the price point. But I think it's fine. 26.5 implied total. Fine offensive line. Kelsey is somebody that I'll get to around that clip as well. So really just over the field on Hill and probably Williams this week if there's no McCoy. But on the Chargers side, yeah, Russell Okun's supposed to miss this one. The offensive line's been terrible all season long, and just any more injuries to this offensive line just really hurts Melvin Gordon's upside, even in a good matchup. So my interest was more so in Gordon than Eckler, but that's dropped after the Okun injury a little bit. It's not a ton of interest over last week. So I think Keenan Allen at 6,100 is one of the better, maybe cash wide receivers, and also good for tournaments.
Yeah, Eckler to me is a guy who I think you could see him get more work here. I don't know how confident I am in that, because Gordon really has gotten the workload since they changed offensive coordinators for the Chargers. And I think that's a bit of a concern, but this kind of game script, you would think Eckler would get more pass game involvement. Ian, do you have a lean here between Gordon and Eckler? Because Gordon's price is up. He's not going to be as chalky as he was last week where he bailed people out with 2 touchdowns. But is this an Eckler or a Gordon spot, or do you really not care about either?
I think it's stay away. I mean, I'm with you. I lean Eckler because of the projected game flow, and he should be out there kind of running around. I think Eckler's so good. He can win against pretty much any defense. So, but now again, I just look, the Chiefs defense, they've been holding everyone under like 10 points or less frequently. And I just haven't seen anything from this Chargers offense, particularly Rivers and just kind of what he's been doing, to think much is going to change. So this just screams blowout spot to me. We've kind of seen the spread creep up on Kansas City's side throughout the week, which I think kind of reflects that growing sentiment.
Yeah, the Chargers down to 17.8 implied points from Vegas, so they've come down a bit. Who knows what they're really playing for motivation-wise. Could be Phillip Rivers' last game in a Chargers uniform, but, with how he's played on the year, that's a pretty bad pick rate, 3.3% interception rate, a little bit above league average. Certainly a spot here. Chiefs defense could also be in play. Might be not the craziest play in the world. Sorry, go ahead, Ian.
No, I agree. I like that call a lot, actually.
Yes, I mean, look, we laid out the case, so maybe that's one spot to go there for a not terribly high-priced defense. The other half of the equation for Kansas City, Miami at New England. This game is an important one for New England. If they win, I think they're locked into the 1 seed. By the way, they need to win this game to get the bye. They're going against Miami here at home. Miami kind of won their Super Bowl last week against the Bengals in a game, the shootout of the week, of course, because that's what the NFL is right now. But hard to see them getting anything going at New England. A colder day here, 14 implied points for Miami. So, I don't know about Contrarian Fitzpatrick stacks, but New England side has the highest implied total on the slate, 31 implied points. But who's relevant here for fantasy, Ian? Who would you play out of New England side, given that they're projected for a ton of points? So somebody's going to get in the end zone.
And it seems like that's someone. We've been saying this all season. It should be Sony Michel. They can get up and control the game and do this. He had 21 carries last week. He had 19 carries the week before. The 2 games before that were losses. I mean, when they get up and they win games, they feed Sony Michel the ball. And credit to the guy. He's been running a little bit better lately. I don't think it's a coincidence. He's been running a little bit better as they've gotten some of these offensive linemen back. And the offense has looked better, especially last week. I mean, the Bengals game, to see them only kind of do that, I know it's disappointing. But that Bills game was the best we've seen Brady look since September pretty much. So they could, once again, be starting to kind of put it together at the right time. I don't know if they have the same ceiling as years past, but facing this Miami team, the Miami offense has been frisky over the last, couple months with Fitzpatrick doing his thing, but the defense has been as bad as ever. So I think, assuming Patriots, who need to win this game, can go out and get in front, it's Sony Michel, and he's at a very reasonable price point. Look, he's right there at 4,900 on DraftKings with Carlos Hyde and David Montgomery. Clearly, Michel has a better matchup with those guys, so I'm fine, loading up with Sony Michel. You're getting 20 touches in a game where hopefully 2 or 3 of those wind up in the end zone.
Yeah, and certainly some risk with Rex Burkhead vulturing a touchdown last week, but I'm with you on Michel. I hate it. I will be playing more than the field of him because the price works, and he's just due to fall into the end zone. This is playoff Sony Michel now, getting a ton of touches, grinding it out. So, Sal, Sony Michel love for you, or is there another Patriot who speaks to your soul more?
Yeah, it's Sony Michel. I have double the field right now on him. And look, he got him to 40 touches the last 2 weeks. And I think there's another interesting thing here. You have the last 2 weeks also, Julian Edelman clearly been playing through an injury that he's been on record pretty much saying he wouldn't have played if this was like week 1 and week 2 at this point, but playing for that playoff seeding in the bye, gets his rest after that. He played 62% and 71% of the snaps the last 2 weeks. He's usually a 95 to 100% guy. So he's seeing a drop off. He had 5 and 6 targets in those weeks. So if you're not on the field, you don't get targets. And in those weeks, yeah, you saw more running, and it makes sense when you're ahead. But if anything, 16.5-point favorites always favors the running backs as a huge favorite. But Edelman, if you're up by 14 in the second half, the fourth quarter, you might only get 50% of the snaps out of him. So I think that 7% ownership, I was wishing it would be higher because I'm probably not going to have much, if any. And a lot of that's just going to trickle into Sony Michel. This spot doesn't seem that great for James White. Michel, 4,900. I want to see what happens with Armstead's ownership after this Fournette stuff being in the same price range as Michel. But Damian Williams, Michel, and Armstead all in that 4K price range stand out to me.
Yeah, we haven't talked about Armstead on the show, but certainly a possibility here that Rykel Armstead is a play that blows up in week 17 because he could just get that Fournette workload. But I guess we should talk about that before we close out this whole show. But yeah, Michel, to me, I think just to sum it up, clearly the only Patriot I think you can trust, quote unquote. But I think it's still a New England offense that's projected to score points. So if you wanted to stack up the pass game, there are ways to do this here. It's just what's your appetite for risk? Do you really want to go with a N'Keal Harry, Julian Edelman stack with Brady? Probably not. So your appetite may vary for this game. Let's keep going through another game that matters. Tennessee at Houston. We've talked about this a little bit throughout some of the other games. Ryan Tannehill is insanely priced. Tennessee needs the win. Derrick Henry's back in there after sitting out last week in a game that weirdly didn't matter because it wasn't a conference game. This one does matter. They need the win. One would think they're going to get it because Houston's playing for nothing. They could end up a 3 seed or a 4 seed, but really that doesn't matter too much for them. Bill O'Brien said he's going to be playing the starters, but not all the guys got downgraded to questionable yesterday. So who knows what to expect here? But Ian, how are you feeling about this game? Do you like Tennessee? Do you want to go to that Tannehill stack and pay up for A.J. Brown after he had a kind of down week last week that was bailed out by a long rushing touchdown?
I was hoping Corey Davis would get ruled out just because we would finally have a more kind of solidified pecking order in Tennessee. But Khalif Raymond and Adam Humphries are out. So it is, it's looking like A.J. Brown, Corey Davis, and Jonnu Smith should be those, undisputed top 3 targets. With that said, man, Tannehill's going to have to continue being like the most efficient quarterback in the league because they don't throw the ball much with him. He's had 9 starts this season. He's thrown 29, 33, 39, 19, 18, 22, 27, 36, and 27 passes. There's just a real chance that against a Houston front seven that I don't think anyone's fearful of. A more rested, more healthy Derrick Henry just takes over this game as he usually does in December. So the passing games, I think I'm on Jonnu Smith more than anyone, just kind of as a lower price pivot to the Dallas Goedert hype. And, we have seen him. They give him the balls to a running back. They just have these big beasts at running back, wide receiver, and tight end. They get in the open field and they do good things. Paying that far up for A.J. Brown in a passing game that has these type of volume concerns is the issue for me. And yeah, I tend to agree with you with the Houston thing. I mean, when Bill O'Brien says he wants to win, I see DeAndre Hopkins sitting there without Will Fuller. It's tempting to go up there and wonder, hey, well, what if Houston does play to win? Then Hopkins, gets 10 plus targets. Corey Jackson was secondary, but just too many signs are pointing to limited snaps with all those guys getting listed as questionable. So I think the only guys I'm looking at in this game are some Derrick Henry in tournaments and then Jonnu Smith.
Sal, do you like any of these guys here? And are you willing to take more of a risk for Houston? Because it does seem like if they do play hard, they have a ton of potential in this spot, but it's hard to question or hard to expect what they're going to be doing.
Yeah, I'm hoping we get more news. I before this morning or really last night, I was going to take the risk on Houston out of all these just kind of sketchy teams to roster in Week 17, but then we saw the Vegas total move 3 points. So instead of being 3-point underdogs, now they're 6-point underdogs, which I think Watson should be worth more than that. So I really don't know what to make of that right now. But 6-point underdogs isn't great. The Vegas line moving isn't great, so I'm not going to be on them as much. I did think Hopkins was a really nice play at low ownership, but it's kind of sketchy dealing with an illness, and now they don't really need the game. So it's a concern. I'm probably staying away from Houston. But yeah, Tennessee, I think there's some nice low-owned pieces. Jonnu Smith, I think, is fine at his price point. And then A.J. Brown at the price tag, I do like it. Derrick Henry being back. Look, you might 24 pass attempts per game right now for Tannehill. It's insane. Leading the slate, only Lamar Jackson, who's not on the slate because he's not playing, but leading the slate in fantasy points per attempt, even more than these mobile quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson. It's insane. He's throwing like 10, 15 times less than some of them. So he's been great. And now you get Derrick Henry back, which is how he's been thriving on play action passing. That helps a guy like A.J. Brown. So it's not like I'm going to play 15, 20, 25% Brown, but I'll play 5% Brown, get above the field. You also have right now Bradley Roby questionable, probably the best defensive back out of all these guys for the Texans in a pretty weak secondary. So Brown at low ownership, I think is fine to get a little bit above that.
Yeah, Brown is a guy. I mean, look, the price is not the best, but he's had the results in the previous weeks that have shown that upside. And as Sal mentioned, Henry being back in the mix, going to draw some attention, going to make them load up the box a bit more, can open up that play action. And it's also worth noting this Houston defense, one of the worst tackling teams in the league, a 47 tackle grade from PFF. And A.J. Brown's a big-bodied monster who just has guys flying off them all the time. So I don't mind taking the stabs on A.J. Brown this week, and certainly Henry going to be an interesting play, even though fundamentally, he's a DFS play. He's always a bit tough because he's just not getting that pass game work. But if he's healthy, he can definitely shred this defense. Another running back heavy game here. Green Bay at Detroit. Just want to burn through these two because these are two important spots. Aaron Jones' ownership hasn't gone up at all, but no Jamal Williams in the mix today. Or this week rather. He is out. Is Aaron Jones worth his elevated salary, Ian, given the fact that he's been over 32 fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3 games? And it seemed like they're leaning on him, kind of a better version of Sony Michel, some could say, in Green Bay.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've only seen 2 games really without Jamal Williams this year. He got knocked out of the Eagles game after 1 play. Aaron Jones played 87% of snaps there. And I don't think they had their number 3 running back even active. So that was a little bit inflated. But the next week was when he went off with the 4-touchdown performance against the Cowboys, and they really used him in the passing game and the run game. Yeah, we have to love Aaron Jones here. I mean, this is why I don't want to really pay up for McCaffrey, because I agree, normally his workload is so unique. But some of these committees like Green Bay, like Tennessee, I think in a must-win game, and Zeke's kind of always doing his thing. But we have 3 running backs in the lower 8K range that, I think we'd all be surprised if they don't finish for more than 20 touches. I know McCaffrey's chance to just get fed targets and targets and targets makes some of these rush attempts less fantasy friendly than what he's dealing with. But there's just so much potential here in a game that the Packers are, I believe, still double-digit favorites in. If not, they should be. I mean, blowing this game out, Aaron Jones, a lead touchdown. I mean, there's no one else in this offense other than Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones that Aaron Rodgers even wants to throw the ball to. So, yeah, no, I want to be heavily overweight on Aaron Jones this week.
The Alan Lazard disrespect on this show. Just too much, Ian. Would have thought you'd be a Lazard guy, but that's fair. Look, Aaron Jones looks like he's in a great spot, so I'm on the same page. Sal, how do you feel about Aaron Jones here going against Detroit in a game that Green Bay, again, also would like to win because they are still potentially in the mix for that bye and also a top seed?
Yeah, more than the 8%. He's a quarter of the ownership right now as Zeke, similarly priced. And yeah, I think Zeke's in a fantastic spot, but I don't think he outscores him that much more as compared to the ownership. So yeah, you have Jamal Williams not playing. He gets 3.5 targets a game. He gets somewhere around 7 carries per game. So that's a lot more work going his way. The backups in Tyler Ervin, who ran an end around last week, pretty much like his only touch in the NFL. And then you also have Dexter Williams, who they wouldn't even play in the preseason because he was fumbling and didn't know the playbook. So Aaron Jones is in line for just 85% of the touches in this game. Probably gets him somewhere around 20 carries, 3, 4, 5 targets / receptions. So really good spot at the low ownership. I was hoping that it was like 4% earlier in the week. So it's like 6 or 7 right now. That's still way too low. I have double right now. And another thing is Detroit's run defense has been bad all year. It improved a lot for like a 4 or 5 week sample when you had Snacks Harrison finally healthy, but Mike Daniels back. Now Mike Daniels has been on IR for a few weeks, so it's just a great spot. Sad for Mike Daniels. He didn't get to play the Packers in any of the 2 games this year for revenge, injured both times.
Yeah, the Detroit defense is bad. Green Bay has shown a penchant to run the ball. I guess we'll close the loop on this game because Devontae Adams is actually going to be pretty decently owned. I don't like him as much as some of the other 8K guys. Julio, I think we talked about him at enough length. I would certainly prefer Michael Thomas if I can, but Adams is in that mix for sure. Ian, do you have any feel here for Devontae Adams? Do you want to be with the field if he's projected for 15%-ish ownership?
Nah, I'm gonna be pretty off. I respect Darius Slay more than a lot of other cornerbacks. I know he's lost some battles this year. He lost last year to Devontae Adams, but he is one of these few guys that will actually move into the slot with these receivers, so it's kind of hard to get away from him. And just in a game that, again, I don't think the Packers are going to need to really be passing throughout. They're going to have plenty of success on the ground with Aaron Jones. No, I don't see this being one of Adams's token just blow up performances.
Sal, you have any love here for Devontae Adams, or are you okay with just mostly Aaron Jones?
Yeah, it's Aaron Jones, but I'm right around the ownership on Adams. I really don't have a strong stance. I think he's fine in cash. I think that the matchup for him is something that he could definitely win, but yeah, it's not a strong stance either way. Even if you only get Rodgers throwing 28 times, the 40% market share of targets that Adams have is a 10 or 11 target day, even on a low volume Rodgers day. So I think it's fine. I think the only other thing is that you have a chalky Packers defense, but I think it's warranted. These guys, they only rush 4. They rush 4 pretty much all the time, and they have top 3 pass rush in the league in terms of pressure rates and hitting the quarterback, only with 4 guys. So it's insane that they do it with so little blitzing. I think against David Blau as double-digit favorites, it's a fine spot to even. I don't like eating chalk on defenses, but if you're playing cash games, it seems like a pretty nice spot.
Yeah, it's a good point here. I targeted against Blau last week with Denver, and Denver doesn't do a great job of actually creating turnovers, but Green Bay does. They do a good job deflecting passes, a 16% pass deflection rate. Over a 3% interception rate. So they can get some takeaways. And Blau has been a guy I feel like has just been dying to turn it over more than he has. And even still, he's at a 3.4% interception rate. So let's talk about, I guess, run through real fast the games that we haven't hit on that we find the most appealing. And for me, I just want to touch on fast. Joe Mixon last week. Oh, that one of the worst kicks in the dick I've had all year long with what Joe Mixon did with his South Beach flu. Perhaps a little bit too much enjoyment of the nightlife and naked women gyrating upon him while covered in glitter. Who knows? But he's back on track this week in the Battle of Ohio. I like going back to Mixon. So this is one spot I feel like people are afraid of this week, but the workload was there. It was there last week, even though he looked terrible and wasn't getting any space to run and also not creating any for himself. And Mixon had almost 25 touches in that game. So I'm willing to go back to Mixon this week. Sal, Ian, do you guys have any lean on Mixon or any other games that you want to hit on that you feel like or players that you want to hit on that we just haven't touched on yet?
I love the Mixon call. I did just week 17 DFS breakdown over Roto-World. He was just my main highlight on running back. Because, yeah, let's go back to this. Even last week, the snaps were down because of the flu, but they still fed the guy 21 carries and he caught 2 balls. I mean, this is now, since their week 9 bye week, he's been getting like upwards of 20 carries and, even a couple of receptions per game. He's so good as a receiver. They just refuse to utilize him. It's so been, one of the more weirder subplots of this entire season. But now he's getting fed. And against the Browns defense, I think we were late to catch on how bad this front 7 got when Myles Garrett got suspended because they played the Dolphins and they played the Steelers again right after losing Myles Garrett. But now Olivier Vernon's been out the last few weeks too with this knee injury. He's questionable again. And they gave up 179 rushing yards to the Bengals, 226 to the Cardinals, then 243 to the Ravens last week. They're slowly kind of getting to that Panthers-Jaguars level, just the single worst run defenses in the league. And, we know Mixon's going to be getting enough carries to get him. So lower projected ownership after last week's dud. Yeah, let's go right back to him.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth pointing out was you were talking about that. I was thinking the same thing, just on a pure paper basis for Cleveland's defense, giving up 142 rushing yards a game, 5 yards per rush. with a 56 run defense grade from PFF. Those are all really bad signifiers, right in line with Carolina and Jacksonville, we talked about a lot earlier. So a spot for Mixon here. Also a decent spot for Chubb on the other side. Sal, do you have any thoughts on this game or any other games that we haven't hit on? If you want to talk about Armstead as well, now's your time.
Yeah, so honestly, with related to Armstead, with Fournette going out, I like Mixon. I wanted to get a ton of him, but it was hard to just kind of get all this ownership to different spots, and I was getting more than the field, but still in single digits. But now with Fournette going out, I imagine Mixon's one of the guys that I just naturally get a ton more of, and I'm actually happy about that. Yeah, 23 and a half touches per game over the last 8. That's not even opportunities. That's just legit touching the ball. He's a workhorse right now. Good spot against Cleveland. They give up top 10, just everything to running backs, yards, attempts. So it's a really good spot for Mixon. Fournette being out means it's just easier to get to him. And I don't think a lot of people will think of it that way. I think they'll just directly look at Armstead's ownership instead of all the other players in that range, like Chubb, like Mixon, both these guys who are 4% owned currently. I don't think the ownership spikes up to where Fournette was around 20%, but it probably should since he's out now and you could easily get to them. So I like both of those running backs on both sides. John Ross saw 13 targets last week. I'm projecting him right now for 7. You have Andy Dalton, and I think that's a low number, but it's just so he doesn't pop more. But you have Andy Dalton coming into these games throwing, when he does start, 40 times per game, 40.4. He's going to chuck it around. Now, this is a spot where they could just easily run the ball more with Mixon. But I do think John Ross at that price point's fine. He has a nice advantage, probably against Greedy Williams more so this weekend.
Yeah, Ross back in the mix, definitely took over that number 2 receiver role after starting a little bit slow coming back from injury. But Tyler Boyd's still in the mix. I'm not point chasing Andy Dalton this week, though. I think that's one situation I'm willing to avoid. Guys, hit that like button. We're in the home stretch here. We're going to do the contrarian running back and QB picks and all that stuff, as well as fade of the week. We appreciate the likes. This helps us keep the light on here on the channel. And of course, shout out to Fantasy Draft, the official home of break-free DFS. We appreciate them helping us put the show on every week and get guys in like Ian, like Sal. So we appreciate Fantasy Draft. And you'll appreciate them too, because they're not charging you rake. And that's a big part of it. So go over there right now and use the promo code AWESEMO for your free 7-day trial. All right, let's do it. Contrarian QB pick of the week, which there's going to be a lot of contrarian QBs out there. Ian, I'll let you go first. Who would be your contrarian QB pick for week 17?
I think I got to go back to, who you called my MVP, Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones. Sal made a good point. The fact he did get priced up is going to keep his ownership down in another really good matchup. And this Giants offense, they can score. The defense is awful, but a must-win game for the Eagles. The Giants seem very willing to try to win this game and just keep their rival out of the playoffs. We know Daniel Jones has that upside, more than enough competent receivers to also get contrarian with the stacks. Yeah, let's do it again.
The people's Lamar Jackson, Daniel Jones, I believe. Calling it. Sal, contrarian QB pick for week 17. Who would it be?
Yeah, it was going to be Danny Jones, but I guess I'm going to go to Baker Mayfield here. A good matchup against Cleveland. The last time he played Cleveland, I think a lot of people kind of reference that game or whenever a team plays another team. It was just a weird game. Denzel Ward had a pick 6, Kareem Hunt had a rushing touchdown, and Baker ran one in. So the receivers didn't do much, but they'll all have great matchups here. I think Baker's fine this week. It's a spot where he's going to have a really nice just pass blocking advantage relative to other weeks because of the lack of pass rush from Cincinnati. So Baker below 6K. He has 2 competent receivers where the ball is going. I'll go there as a contrarian option.
And so Jameis is over the ownership threshold, but he would be my pick if he were a little bit lower owned, but he's not. So I'll go Case Keenum because why not? I'm a Dallas fan. I'm a self-loathing Dallas fan. They have found millions of ways to blow every opportunity they can. So what would be more appropriate than to blow a game to Case Keenum, Steven Sims, and Kelvin Harmon at home in a game they need to win? So I'll go Keenum and have a little bit of exposure there. 3% ownership for Keenum right now. Sal, contrarian running back pick for week 17. Who would it be?
Yeah, man. So there's some popular big names around the 5% threshold. I want to go to Mixon. We were just talking about him, but I'll go really off the board here. I'll go right back to what we saw last week. Mike Boone. He was very popular in the showdown slate. He's less than 1% owned. It's a guy that I think you can get 5% of and it'd be okay. You're not going to have Cook. You might, as long as you don't have Madison, which I don't know if they'll go there. Going to rest a lot of starters this week. The Bears somewhat improved with Hicks back on the defensive line, but I'll go Mike Boone for a guy below 1%. Really contrarian option.
Ian, who would be your contrarian running back for week 17?
Yeah, I saw him at 2% on your guys' ownership projections. I didn't really talk about him on this pod, but Marlon Mack, 6,900, just saw what he did against the Panthers. Keep talking about these Panthers and Jaguars run defenses. Let's get it. The Jags have 5 or 6 off-ball linebackers on IR at this point. I mean, it's honestly kind of ridiculous. They just lost, obviously, their focal point of their offense for better and for worse. Jordan Wilkins got ruled out this week, kind of hurt his ankle. I think Jonathan Williams probably just comes in like he has in past weeks and kind of just takes that backup early down role kind of seamlessly. I know Nyheim Hines is going to be a factor on pass downs. But again, we saw last week before that game got away. I mean, Marlon Mack was getting fed. It can certainly get away from him again. But if the game becomes a blowout, like someone's going to have to score his touchdowns. Mack had over 100 yards and a touchdown last week. Got unlucky with, Jacoby coming in from the 1 yard line. I think Wilkins got one from the 1 yard line as well. So the Colts, Quentin Nelson got clear from the concussion protocol, maybe like one of the only linemen in the league that we really need to worry about their status when assessing an offense. But no, I think Mack, as he does, a lot of these weeks in a good matchup, has that 100+ yards and multi-touchdown upside.
Yeah, Mack is really intriguing. I think the Jonathan Williams point is also a good one because I was thinking that Wilkins was going to be a decent play just because he had a really nice game last week as well. Took a lot of that work away from Mack down the stretch and ended up having a better day overall. So it's possible Williams does that, but I would be willing to take that stab on Mack. I'm going to be a coward. We already talked about this guy, but Mixon, I think, he cost me so much money last week. I'm going back there out of spite just because he's going to make it back for me. God damn it, one way or another. But Mixon is going to be my contrarian running back. Ian, contrarian wide receiver, who would it be?
My contrarian wide receiver is Anthony Miller. And we didn't really talk about this. I like this Bears passing game in this matchup. The Vikings seem like they're going to be resting a lot of starters. And even when they aren't resting a lot of their starters, I mean, their cornerbacks have just been awful this year. Each of Mackenzie Alexander, Trey Waynes, Mike Hughes, and especially Xavier Rhodes, well outside of PFF's top 45 cornerbacks on the season. Anthony Miller was completely balling in weeks 11 through 15 before last week's dud where Jamon Wims inexplicably, had all the targets. But Miller literally played every snap in that game. I think it was just more of a 1 week fluke than anything. He's very affordable at 5,800. I'm fine paying up for Allen Robinson 7,200 as well. I know. Mitchell Trubisky experience. I'm not, happy about risking with that either. But again, Miller in week 13, wide receiver 8, week 15, wide receiver 5. Like he has put together boom weeks despite having Trubisky under center. Now we're getting him at way reduced ownership.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Certainly a time where Mitch has something to prove here if he's going to try to hold on to that job in the offseason. Sal, how about you? Who'd be your contrarian wide receiver pick?
Yeah, contrarian wide receiver pick, like this guy a lot, well above the field right now, would be Golden Tate. Mentioned him earlier, coming in right now just around 1 to 2% ownership. He's a guy this year who is seeing just good target share per week, 7.3. But when Golden Tate's in there, when Daniel Jones is in there, Golden Tate's seeing closer to 10 targets per game. Jones came back last week, had an 11-target game, has a very nice matchup in the slot against Maddox. One of the better advantages on the entire weekend for a slot wide receiver versus slot cornerback. The only issue here is that the Eagles do pressure. They get to the cornerback. We've seen this year Daniel Jones be fine in some spots against pressure and then just fumble the ball away 2 or 3 times a game. So it is a concerning spot. If anything, a slot wide receiver you would think would benefit if there's more pass rush. So I'll go Golden Tate there at 5,100.
And I'll go the guy we talked about earlier because he's projected for under 5% ownership, Brashad Perriman. Brashad Perriman won me my season-long league last week, and he bailed out a lot of Saturday lineups too that were crap. So I'll take Brashad Perriman here and trust the fact that he's not the same player we saw before. And 201 air yards is no joke against this Atlanta defense. All right, fade of the week. Here's the fun one to close it out. Ian, who would be your fade of the week for week 17?
My fade. Are we not doing tight ends?
No, we never do tight ends there. If you want to do a tight end, please be a hero.
I was a real quick go. Tyler Eifert at 3,400. I think is one of the cheapest guys that you could reasonably expect 5 or more targets from. He was a part-time player for almost the entire first 14 weeks of the season, other than the 1 week where they tried to showcase him for the trade deadline. But he's at 55%, 63% snap rates over the last 2 weeks and 13 targets. He got the nice Hail Mary catch. I get it. I'm not expecting that to happen again, but very winnable matchup and, just 47 season high 47 snaps in the slot or out wide. He's kind of like Mike Gesicki. They use him as a pure wide receiver half the time versus this inline tight end because they do have CJ Uzomah there. So in a week where most of the quality tight ends are priced up, I think Eifert at 3,400 is about as cheap as you can go. If Sal wants to give his fade, I can roll back around after you guys. All
right, Sal, I won't make you give a tight end. Who'd be your fade of the week?
Yeah, I think I kind of just mentioned it earlier, but for me, it's going to be Michael Thomas, 15% ownership right now. The other time that he was 9,900, I had 0%. He scored 28. And look, he's a guy that if he goes for his 30 for you, he probably helps you, but he doesn't really harm people who don't play him because of the price point. If he ends up going for 35 to 40, I'll just bite the bullet on that one. But I might full fade him. If not, I'll be well under the field on 15%.
Ian, how about you? Who'd be your fade of the week?
I'm actually, we didn't talk about him too much. Raquel Armstead. If he was in the 3K range and we were just getting that many, guaranteed touches for that price point, sure. But this Jaguars team, again, I don't want to say anyone's quitting, but if anyone's quitting, it's been the Jaguars over these last 6 weeks. I mean, they just have to do everything in their power to even get to 20 points, it seems like, and that's not even happening most of the time. Definitely a chance they're more run heavy. I know Armstead has caught some passes this year, but man, like the overwhelming majority of those have just been last drive of the game, just kind of dumped down after dumped out. I really don't think he's a proven 3-down back by any stretch. I'm very wary, after we see what happens with Ty Johnson, some of these other backup running backs, we shouldn't just assume a guy is going to walk into an 80% snap role just because that's what their starter did. I mean, I don't think Reggie Bonifone would be doing that if McCaffrey was out either. So just be careful about assuming that one running back's massive workload is going to seamlessly go to his backup. I'm probably going to be lower off him because, again, why not go up to Damian Williams? Why not go up to Sony Michel? Guys that have similar touch projections and better offenses at a similar price point.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Kind of the same thing here. I mean, though this guy has gotten the work with his starter out, DeAndre Washington's going to be my fade of the week. I still don't mind him. I think he's actually a very talented player. In some respects, I like what he does in that offense more than Josh Jacobs because he can catch passes. He's pretty nimble in that aspect of the game. But this matchup against Denver is really bad for running backs. I mean, Kerryon Johnson returned, didn't get a big workload, but he did have a tough time getting going there. Not the same situation, but Denver's run defense 91 graded by PFF on the year, giving up 112 yards per game. Oakland commits to the run. I could be wrong here, but I would just rather go some other ways. I feel like there are running backs who have big upside, and we have DeAndre Washington getting over 20% ownership, so he'll be a very chalky play. All right, so that's it for this Week 17 edition here. But of course, as always, we appreciate our guests as much as we can. We want to turn the floor over to them to plug whatever they want. So Ian, I'll let you go first. Plug whatever you want in the world. Your Twitter, @HeartTits. People want to follow you on there. But of course, anything in the world. Tell the people what you want.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, man. Yeah, just follow me on Twitter @IHeartTits, IHARTITZ. Don't forget that Z, otherwise things get weird. And, it's good. I'll be posting out all my articles and podcasts throughout the week. I know fantasy football season is over, but the content season never ends. So tune in and I'll, have multiple stuff going out per week, every week as usual.
Yeah, Ian's one of the smartest guys. Give him a follow right now because he is doing a great job out there at Roto-World. And also, one of our favorite guests legitimately on the year. And Sal, you of course doing a ton of us for Osmo, and you are on @SalVetri DFS. People want to follow you. What else do you want to plug? What else is going on in your life that you want to give the people?
Yeah, you can just follow me over on Twitter as well. And then over on, if you want more content, I do have a YouTube channel, just Sal Vetri, if you want to see any more content over there.
Yeah, check out Sal's videos. Sal does a great job for the community he's building over there. Been a great addition for us at Osmo, but doing a great job building up his own brand as well. So check out that YouTube channel and go check me out at Chris Spags. I got my podcast that came out today, my personal one where I talk about non-DFS things. So check that out. That's my plug. I get one because why not? We appreciate all you guys watching. Hope you're having a great holiday season. Hope you have a great new year as well. Week 17 is going to be a chaotic one, but it should be a fun one. So tune into our shows tomorrow, Deeper Dive, Live Before Lock, and all the usual stuff. But we appreciate all of you watching. Have a great rest of your 2019 and a great start to 2020. We'll see you guys again soon.